So Onision opens this comment with, quote, my opinion on ephebophilia. Vocabulary test. If you look up the Greek components that this word is made of, it really doesn't make you sound any better than just saying pedophile. It really doesn't. Anyway, Onision coming in. Quote, his opinion on ephebophilia is this: if they're a consenting adult, they're a consenting adult. I will never understand why 18 or 19-year-olds are allowed to sign their life away to get deployed and die in war, yet the internet freaks out when they choose an older partner. Here he is quoting someone who claims her parents have a 23-year age gap. Oh, we're trying to normalize this. Her mother was 18 and her dad was 40. Now her mom's 57 and her dad is 80. The legal age of consent in Germany, 14. The legal age of consent in Japan, he claims, 13. But Americans will freak out and call you a pedophile if you sleep with people who are 18 plus. Oh, first and foremost, it's interesting to note that what he's saying factually is just not true. It's then interesting to reflect on why he's saying it, and a little bit more philosophically and profoundly, it's interesting to reflect on the difference between a sincere ethical argument and an excuse. In Germany, the absolute age of consent is 18. Under certain circumstances, with certain caveats, a 16-year-old can get away with it. Onision, if you follow your own advice and move to Germany and sleep with someone who's only 14, you can be looking at 3 years in prison. No more than 3 years in jail. That's what's stipulated there. So I don't know how you define age of consent, but the possibility of going to prison for 3 years for relations with a 14-year-old, I would not say that's the way people in the English language normally use the concept of age of consent. The issue in Japan has to do with regional law. Each region has a different age of consent, and in reality, nowhere is it 13. But why is he presenting us with these factoids at all? Is this really a sincere ethical argument he's presenting, or is he just making excuses? Oh, what do you think this is? This is a videotape of Onision playing with dolls with a teenage girl. Who is that teenage girl? She's not just anyone, Onision. She's the girl you came out on the internet and said you wish you had married instead of your first wife. That's your first wife's younger sister. That's the same girl you kissed at age 15. Now, admittedly, you and her tell two very different versions of the story. You say that she kissed you and you ran away horrified. Her story is almost 180 degrees the opposite. You were at some kind of a party. There was alcohol involved. I don't know. She says she was intoxicated. She says you kissed her. She was horrified and ran away. There's an interesting symmetry to those two versions of events. Yeah, that's the 15-year-old girl who years later, after she was 18, became a nude model, appeared in softcore pornography, and part of the breakdown of your relationship with your first wife, part of the reason why your first wife still hates you to this day, is that you were caught with the pornographic images of the younger sister, that it became clear to your first wife, as she says here, that throughout the whole of your relationship, apparently throughout the whole of your life, Onision, your white whale, your obsession, was this teenage girl, the younger sister of your first wife. And in some ways, that obsession seems to have consumed you. Look at this. You were still trying to get together with her. You were still trying to get together with your first wife's younger sister when you were already dating, when you were already getting set up to get married to Lainey. Lainey, the woman who's now the mother of your children. Lainey, who later decided to identify as a man. You kept trying to reconcile with, spark a relationship again with this girl whom you met, whom you first knew, playing with dolls. And you did more than just play with dolls. There was a period of his life when Onision was not humorously, not joking around. He was seriously kind of setting up a new religion called Siseska, something like that, and engaged in ghost hunting and believed in supernatural and superstitious things. And he spent that time, he was spending a lot of quality time with his first wife and this much younger little sister. So now his first wife has to look back at all those things and regret, and wonder about his motives in all this time that they spent together. And yep, Onision is a terrible writer. But if you take the time to pore over this stuff, you're going to see that he really makes an effort to have well-written prose here, reaching out to the younger sister. He says how much she meant to him. Here he's saying, you've always been such a cool person in my mind. You're still the person I used to play video games with. You were such an inspiration to me. He specifies that, she was an inspiration to him from the first moment when they met. Quote, "The moment I met you, I connected with you. I was inspired by you," close quote. That's as good as Onision's creative writing gets, guys. He's really putting in effort here. But how old was she when they first met? This is what she was. She was this teenage girl playing with dolls. She was a 15-year-old who looked and sounded and acted like a child. And it's more disturbing that Onision himself also looked and sounded and acted like a child. And they made YouTube videos together, and they went ghost hunting together. It was an obsession that in some ways destroyed his first marriage, and in some ways still seems to be destroying his life. What is the difference between making an excuse and sincerely advancing an argument about ethics and morality, right and wrong? I think when we advance a sincere argument of that type, we're reflecting on what kind of person we aspire to be ourselves. We're reflecting on what kind of person we would want others to be, especially the people in our lives we care about. What kind of person would I want my own brother to grow up to be, my own cousin, my own nephew, my own son? And we're reflecting on what kind of society we want to have. What's the sense of dignity and honor we live by? What's the code of brotherly love or what have you, right? It's got to be scaled up. Those are sincere arguments about ethics and morality. And excuses, by contrast, are short-term, self-centered, self-serving, and insincere by that standard, in that they fail to show a sincere interest in what kind of society we're all going to live in, what kind of people we're going to be or become. But so you think this is a sincere argument, Onision, or is this just an excuse for your own bad behavior? Onision, let me ask you, do you want to live in a society where 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds can't go to McDonald's unaccompanied because adult men will try to initiate relationships with them? Is that the kind of society you want to live in? That's not the kind of society I want to live in. Now, I'm vegan. I never go to McDonald's. But whenever I'm in a situation like that, wherever I'm in a situation where you're in like a fast food restaurant or something, and there are a group of 13-year-olds or 14-year-olds hanging out as a group of friends, like a group of them with no parent overlooking them. I know a lot of people hate that, they're these unruly kids making noise and whatever, messing up the restaurant. Whenever I look at that, I think, wow, I'm so glad I don't live in Saudi Arabia. I'm so glad I don't live in a more repressive, traditional culture where children don't have this kind of freedom, they don't have this kind of luxury. And I'm so glad I don't live in a culture where marriage and men pursuing, teenage girls for a relationship, where that makes it impossible because young people have to be defended against those kinds of overtures. So it's a wonderful luxury to live in a society where kids that age have a little bit of freedom and a little bit of agency to go and hang out at a McDonald's without, constant parental supervision. I notice you only talk about one half of the equation. You say, why is it that 18 and 19-year-olds are allowed to give their life away, sign up for the army, but the 18-year-old isn't allowed to choose to be with an older partner, an older husband, an older wife, an older lover, or what have you? What about the decision made by the older person, Onision? Right? I think the ethics of that, the advantages and the disadvantages of that, are really worth reflecting on. If you spend time with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and to be clear, Sarah, the most notorious of Onision's current ex-girlfriend, Sarah, she was living in their house, raising their kids, spending a lot of time with them at age 16, 17, and 18. You are going to have to tolerate an unbelievable level of abuse, of tantrums, of bad behavior, because a 16-year-old is going to act like a 16-year-old, and you have signed up to tolerate it. There's no way that you as the older party are going to be able to treat an 18-year-old as accountable in the same way that you would treat a 28-year-old or a 38-year-old. Put it this way, in the same way that a 16-year-old will be cruel and insulting to his or her parents, and the parents have to have the detachment to deal with that and respond in a way that's sagacious and helpful and not vengeful or something. I mean, look, even think about friendships at age 16, 17, 18. Teenagers like that, they will treat their best friend in a manner that would be considered abusive for a 30-year-old. The way a 16-year-old treats her best friend would not be acceptable for a 30-year-old, how a 30-year-old would treat their coworker or colleague. And if the 30-year-old treated their friend that way, the friend would walk out. It's not just that this hypothetical 18-year-old is choosing to be with an older man, okay? The older man is choosing to be with her. The older man is taking on a disproportionate and unequal responsibility, and the older man is taking on a really strange form of vulnerability that a lot of people can't relate to. And a lot of people are not mature enough for that. There are a lot of guys, let's say a guy who's 28. There are a lot of guys who at 28 cannot cope with a relationship with an 18-year-old girl, precisely because it's this bizarre, unequal relationship of extraordinary and asymmetrical responsibility, where she's going to treat him like an 18-year-old, and he's supposed to treat her back with a lot of care, a lot of deference, a lot of responsibility, no matter how abusive or uncontrollable or crazy, she may be. So as an older man in that situation, that's what you're signing up for. I think even though it's more rare, I think if you're talking about an older woman signing up with a teenage dude, that's what she'd be signing up for too. I can remember what I was like at 16. I can remember what I was like at 18. It's not even about smart versus stupid. You can be brilliant as a teenager, but you don't know how to act. You don't know how to take responsibility. You don't know, least of all, does a teenager know how to conduct herself or himself in a home where they're taking care of young children. It's an unbelievable imposition to invite this teenage girl into your life, Onision, and then have her take care of your kids. It's a huge commitment, and if you want to make this comparison to the military, then guess what, Onision? You're the army. You should be looking at yourself as having an incredibly high level of commitment and care towards this teenager that put herself, into your hands.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.